Nothing wrong with getting it in and getting it out the way. That's one thing that when I did go to the gym, Jason, I love going to the gym in the morning. That way, in case I mess up during the day, I could go back to the gym later on. Yeah, he definitely motivated more than me. That's the one thing about going to the gym and getting started that you can't stop. Because if you stop, it's so hard to get back into it. Look at me. Won't even entertain it. All right, guys, let's get in here.
Money and control. Those are the two things that the defendant, Herbert Swilley, stood to lose as his marriage to Tim Smith fell apart and Tim planned to leave him. But instead of letting Tim go, the defendant savagely murdered him. He beat Tim in the face, then he placed a ligature around Tim's neck and squeezed it so tightly that the blood vessels in Tim's eyes burst and his neck broke. Tim Smith was 59 years old when he was brutally murdered. Tim was loved by everyone who knew him. He was warm, welcoming, and made people feel better about life. One of Tim's passions was making sure there was good assisted living facilities for seniors. Tim was the executive director of Brookdale Senior Living, which was an assisted living facility here in Ocala for senior citizens. His position, executive director, was a high-level position with a salary well over $100,000 a year, plus bonuses. Tim had been the director there about 7 years before he was murdered. Now, the assisted senior living healthcare industry was relatively small in the state of Florida, and Tim was well regarded and well known in that industry. Tim had a great life. He had a good job, he had a nice home, and a diverse group of friends that adored him. But there was one glaring problem: his relationship with the defendant, his husband, Herbert Swilley. Herbert and Tim had been together for about 15 years and married for 8 of those years. But before they began their romantic relationship, the defendant was married to a woman named Angela for many years. The defendant and Angela had one child together, a daughter named Jordan, who was born in 2003. Now, Tim and the defendant had been friends for about 4 years before their relationship turned romantic, and the defendant left his wife and moved in with Tim. And Jordan was about 8 years old when this happened. Now, Tim and the defendant lived in several different places before they settled on a home in southeast Ocala. Now, the home was on a nice-sized piece of property. It was 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. It had 2 separate living rooms. It had a garage outside and a big shed outside as well. And on that property, they had 2 cameras. A Ring doorbell camera that was on the front door, and then a camera that was high up on a pole that faced their shed and their garage. Now, in the beginning of Tim and the defendant's relationship, Jordan lived with her mother. But when Jordan became a freshman in high school, she decided to move in with Tim and the defendant. Tim and Jordan were very close, and they had a special relationship. Jordan considered Tim his second father. Now, in addition to their main home that I just told you about, Tim and the defendant rented a small 2-bedroom apartment that was about 2 miles away from their main home where they lived. Tim and the defendant had an open relationship. They had sex with other men together, and they had sex with other men separately. And they would meet these other men on dating apps, mainly Grindr and Adam for Adam. Now, they also liked to role play and do fantasy things in their sexual relationship. So in this apartment, they put things like a sex swing, a massage table, and they had a toolbox that had different kinds of sexual paraphernalia in the room. This was something that they thought was fun and they both enjoyed. And the reason they got the apartment is because Jordan was living at home with them, and they wanted to keep this away from her. Now, Tim was the breadwinner of the family. While he had a high-paying job as the executive director of Brookdale, the defendant, in contrast, was a handyman. The defendant and Tim liked to do things. They liked to travel. They liked to buy things like motorcycles. And they spent Tim's money as fast as he made it. And the defendant could not afford to live this lifestyle without Tim's salary. Now, the defendant was painfully aware of this fact. And over time, he grew bitter. And he came to resent Tim for this. Now, the relationship between Tim and the defendant had been declining for years and had just gotten worse in the month leading up to Tim's murder. The beginning of the end was when they both stopped drinking. Tim and the defendant had been heavy drinkers for most of their relationship. But somewhere around 2019, Tim joined Alcoholics Anonymous. The defendant followed Tim's lead and joined several months later. Tim embraced the AA lifestyle. His chapter's name was Happy, Joyous, and Free. He led many meetings, he sponsored countless people, and he went to meetings up to 5 times a week. Now, through AA, Tim cultivated a very close group of friends. And these friends would go out to dinner after meetings, and they would occasionally go to brunch on Sunday. Now, once the drinking stopped, the problem is the arguing started. They started arguing all the time. It had gotten so bad at home that Jordan would leave home early and go to work at Burrito's Italian restaurant just to get away from the argument at the house between Tim and the defendant. Now, Tim knew the marriage was over, and he was going to leave, and he knew it couldn't be fixed. And in early March, a professional recruiter reached out to Tim and said, hey, there's this job for an executive director at an assisted living facility for seniors in DeLand, and we're interested in you. Tim thought, this is my chance. I can leave the defendant, get a new job, and get away. Tim sent his resume to a recruiter, and he did an hour-long video interview that was recorded over Zoom. This interview was sent to the regional director for this assisted living facility in DeLand named Nina Corsi. And she looked at it, and she was very interested in Tim. And he was very close to getting this new job. The defendant knew all about it, was not happy. He knew if Tim left and took this new job, he wouldn't be able to stay in the house they lived in. He wouldn't be able to have the lifestyle that he had become accustomed to. And he started telling other friends about it, how he wasn't happy. And Tim was going to try to take this job. And he became very angry. 5 days before Tim was murdered, the defendant told a friend named Daryl Levine, if Tim thinks he's leaving me and taking a new job in DeLand, he's got another thing coming. He also told that same friend, Jordan and I loved Tim. And this really bothered Daryl, his friend. And it stuck out in his head because it was in the past tense. So things got worse, time went by, and the defendant had to face some cold, hard facts. It's the end of March now. He knows Tim's leaving him. Tim's moving to another city to get a new job, and he can't support himself without Tim. He's mad, He feels cheated. He thinks Tim owes him, and he's not going to let Tim leave him like that. So to the defendant, there was only one option. Tim had to die. Because that would solve all his problems. Because Tim had a life insurance policy worth $333,000. Tim also had a 401 retirement plan with $48,000 in it. And guess who was the beneficiary of both of those things? The defendant, Herbert Swilley. $381,000 surely would go a long way for the defendant once Tim was dead. So the defendant decided, I'm going to kill him, I'm going to murder Tim, and he picked the date. March 23rd, Thursday of 2023. And this day, at this time, Tim was closer than he'd ever been to getting that offer for that new job. Because Friday morning was one of his final interviews, which was going to be with Nina Corsi, the executive director of the facility of the new job. So Thursday was the day. And the defendant put his plans in motion. Now, the defendant and the victim were both physically fit people. And the defendant knew he would need some help taking Tim down. What was the easiest and quietest way to do that? It would be to drug Tim. That way Tim couldn't fight back. That was part of his plan that day. So that Thursday, that morning, everybody goes to work, Jordan, the defendant, and Tim. They come home that evening, they all have dinner together. They end up watching a movie, the three of them. Around 9:30, the defendant and Tim go to bed, and Jordan goes in her room. Sometime that evening of the 23rd, the defendant secretly overdoses Tim with diphenhydramine. Diphenhydramine is in medicines like Tylenol PM and Benadryl. Diphenhydramine is the ingredient that makes you tired in those medicines. Now, a normal dose of diphenhydramine, if you tested somebody's blood, would be 55 nanograms per milliliter. When they tested Tim's blood after he died, his level of diphenhydramine was 2,000 nanograms per milliliter. Tim was probably not even awake when the attack began, but he certainly couldn't fight back. The defendant beat him. He had a black eye. Tim had bruising on his face. He had cuts and swelling. And then the defendant put that ligature over Tim's neck. And he squeezed it so tight and for so long that he broke Tim's neck. And you will hear that the type of injury is called a hyperextension type of injury, which means Tim's neck was bent backwards this way until it broke. Now, the next part of the defendant's plan, he already had it ready. I'm going to say that Tim left in the middle of the night to meet somebody for sex at the apartment, and that person's who killed him. So we had to start getting that plan ready. So after he killed Tim, the defendant put Tim's body in his own white truck. You'll see pictures of this white truck. It's distinctive because the whole truck is white, except for the tailgate, which is black. Now, the defendant knew also, hey, I gotta take Tim's phone as well. with me to the apartment because Tim's not going to go meet somebody to have sex without his phone. So he takes Tim's phone as well. And then he says, okay. Also, Tim always takes this small black bag that he has with him when he goes to the apartment. In the bag are Tim's wallet, his keys, and a few other things. So the defendant gets that bag also. He puts the bag, Tim's phone, and Tim's body in his white truck, and he drives over to the apartment. And from there, he stages the murder. He puts out 2 bowls and a bag of chips, so it looks like Tim had somebody over. He takes off Tim's pants, leaves him on the floor in the bedroom, half naked. He takes bleach and sprays Tim's body and all around Tim and takes some towels to make it look like somebody tried to erase the DNA. Then he leaves Tim there with the bag and the phone. He gets in his truck and he goes back home. But now he has to get Tim's Jeep over to the apartment because obviously Tim had to get there somehow. So he leaves his white truck at their house. He gets in Tim's Jeep. Tim has a white Jeep. And he drives Tim's vehicle to the apartment. He leaves Tim's vehicle at the apartment, goes inside, and puts the key to Tim's Jeep in that black bag where Tim would have put it. But how's he going to get home if he leaves Tim's Jeep there? Easy. He's physically fit. It's a 2-mile walk in the middle of the night in March. He walks back home. And when he gets home, it's around 3:26. First thing he does, access the Ring doorbell application on his phone. He's got to get rid of all that footage. It's going to show him moving everything around, moving Tim's body and setting everything up. So he deletes that. Now we're well into Friday morning, the 24th, by the time he does all this. So he normally gets up and goes to the gym at 4:40. So he's going to go along like a regular day, like nothing happened. He gets up, leaves for the gym at 4:40, gets to the gym at 5. Stays to the gym till 6 o'clock, and goes home. Takes a shower and changes, then leaves again. And he goes to Lowe's. And then, oddly, his next stop is the dump. At 7 in the morning, right when they open, he's there with his truck and his trailer. After he goes to the dump, he goes back home. And now he goes home because the dog groomer is supposed to be coming. And he wants to make sure that Jordan's awake to let the dog groomer in. But ultimately, Jordan will end up to be one of the many mistakes that the defendant made. Because remember, Jordan was home when he killed Tim. And even though Tim was drugged, surely there was some noise. So when Jordan woke up that morning, she asked him, "Where's Tim?" He said he didn't know. And he asked Jordan, "Did you hear anything last night?" And Jordan said, "I thought I heard a door or something." And he said, "You didn't hear anything. That's all you need to remember." Jordan started to ask some more questions, but he quickly shut it down and said, "If anybody asks, I was home all night." Jordan was upset, confused, and thought all of this behavior was very suspicious. But the defendant again went on with his day as planned. He left, he went down to the villages, and he did some of his handyman work that he was doing in the villages. Good afternoon, everyone.
No, actually, therapists, no, they look alike. Yeah, that is the one that has the glasses on. That's the defendant, And then the other guy, that's his hubby. Yeah. I thought the same thing too. I had to keep looking. But I found the picture with both of them. See? Wait a minute. You can't see it. Yeah. Okay, let me get our next part up because she was not finished. So I'm going to get the next part up for us. Yeah, they were married.
In the meantime, people at Tim's work, this is Friday now, are getting concerned because Tim doesn't come to work. And he always comes to work, or he lets them know if he's not coming. They text him throughout the day and ask him some questions what related to work, and he doesn't respond. And this is not like Tim at all. So they get concerned. And one of his close friends and coworkers, Tammy Warner, calls the defendant around 4 o'clock and says, "Hey, Tim didn't come to work today. What's going on?" The defendant, "Oh, I don't know. I don't know where he is. I'm going to run over to the apartment and see if he's there." So he goes over to the apartment. Tim's Jeep's there. He doesn't go in. He calls Tammy back. "Well, his Jeep's there. I lost the key, or Tim took it. I don't have the key, so I can't get in. But his Jeep's there." Tammy says, "Well, we need to do a well-being check. Call the sheriff's office." "Okay, I'll call the sheriff's office for a well-being check." He calls the sheriff's office. This is a lot after 4 o'clock. "My husband Tim didn't go to work today. His Jeep's at an apartment we own." They say, "Okay, we'll send somebody out." The sheriff's office sends a deputy out. This is Friday around 4:30, 5 o'clock. The defendant's not there, but the deputy gets there, and the deputy calls the defendant on the phone. The defendant's calm, no sense of urgency, and says, "Oh, my husband didn't go to work today. We have this apartment. I'm not really concerned. I don't have a key, so I'll try to reach the landlord to get a key to go in." Because the defendant had no sense of urgency, was calm during the call, and didn't tell the deputy anything that would give him cause to break down the door to see if Tim's in there, the deputy says, "Okay, well, you're not telling me anything that can let me go into the place, so if he doesn't come home tomorrow, you can do another well-being check. Call us back." "Okay, fine." So the defendant then, that Friday evening, the 24th, goes to an AA meeting around 5:30. And everybody that sees him there knows something is wrong. They describe him as red-faced, sweaty, nervous, fidgety. And they ask him after the meeting, "What's going on?" And he says, "Tim and I got in a fight. I don't know where he is. He's not responding to my texts or my calls. And his Jeep is at the apartment." So a couple friends say, "You're a handyman. Take the lock off the door and see if he's in there." The defendant's response is, "I'm not technically on the lease, so I could get arrested for burglary, so I can't go in there." Okay. But of course, all of Tim's friends are now very concerned. The people from work, the people from AA, they're calling and trying to reach Tim. So now we go into Saturday morning. Still no sign of Tim. The defendant goes to work. back to the villages to do some handyman work. In the meantime, all of the friends are calling him. Have you heard from Tim? They are panicked. He is not. Where's Tim? Have you heard from Tim? You've got to get into the apartment. Okay, fine. I'll call the sheriff's office again. He calls the sheriff's office around 10 that morning. Hey, can you come back and do another well-being check? I've gotten in touch with the landlord now. We have a key to get in. So this is around 10 in the morning on the 25th. They send another deputy out. And the deputy comes out. The defendant is already there at the apartment with the landlord, Jack, and they have the key, but they're just standing there. The deputy goes up. Hey, what's going on? Hey, that's my husband's Jeep there. I haven't seen him in 2 days. We have the key. Okay. Deputy takes the key, goes into the apartment by himself. And of course, we know what he finds. He finds Tim dead on the floor with the ligature marks around his neck. They're clear and defined and black, and they go around his neck. And he doesn't have any pants on, and he's been beaten. And of course, the deputy immediately suspects that it's a murder. So the deputy goes outside, and the defendant says to the deputy, "Is he in there?" And the deputy says, "Yes." And he says, "Is he okay?" And the deputy says, "No." He doesn't cry, break down, ask one question about what the deputy found. He doesn't say, what happened to him? What kind of condition did he in? Is it a suicide? Not a question. The deputy tells him, "I'm going to call major crimes. They're going to be on their way." He never asks, why are you calling major crimes? What did you find in there that would make you call major crimes? He says, okay. And the deputy says, give me a little rundown of the story. He tells him the well-rehearsed story. We went to bed at 9:30. I woke up the next morning. I thought Tim was still there. Maybe I was wrong. He didn't go to work. I haven't seen him since then. So the deputy calls his sergeant, and they call major crimes. And they call forensic crime scene technicians. And they put yellow crime scene tape up, and they mark off the whole apartment. And the detective, Daniel Pinder, is assigned as the lead detective in the case, and he comes out, along with many other officers. And they spend hours processing the apartment, swabbing things for DNA, checking for fingerprints, taking photographs. And they spend all day, almost all day Saturday doing that. Now on Monday, the 27th, the sheriff's office has a briefing, which means they get together all the detectives together to talk about this case. And Detective Pinder gives them a rundown of what they have. And they start assigning different detectives things to do. So they give some detectives, they say, we want you to go back to the area around the apartment. Talk to all the neighbors. See if they know anything. Check everybody that lives around there for cameras. Ring doorbell cameras, anybody that may have any footage. Okay, we're gonna have those people do that. Send some detectives to where they live, their main residence. Talk to all the neighbors there. Check for cameras from neighbors that live right next door. See what that shows us. They send some detectives to all the businesses that are between that 2-mile stretch between the residence and the apartment. Go to every single one of those businesses and see if they have any video surveillance. Also, check the trash. They check the trash at the apartment complex, and they check the trash there. And they start interviewing people. So all the detectives are doing all of this work. And while this is happening, the Marion County Sheriff's Office puts out 2 press releases that say, hey, we're working on this murder. If you know anything about the murder or about Tim Smith or Herbert Swilley, please contact us. And the floodgates open at this point. Friends of Tim and the defendant start contacting the sheriff's office. And what they paint is a picture of a marriage in trouble, with one of them being very angry, the defendant, and not happy with Tim. And this is upsetting to Detective Pinder because the defendant told him everything was fine with the relationship. Everything's great. We're not fighting. We have a great marriage. But that is not what all the friends, co-workers, and everyone else started telling the sheriff's office. One of their friends, a close friend of both of them, named Candace Baker, called in, went down to see the detective Pinder. And she said, listen, I went over to the house on Sunday, the day after they found Tim's body. And from the moment the defendant answered the door, I was upset because of how unconcerned he was that Tim was dead. But more than that, when I got inside the home, he was throwing everything of Tim's away. There was a big garbage can in the pantry. All of Tim's food and snacks and vitamins were in that. All of Tim's knickknacks were in the garbage. But what upset her the most was there was a stack of framed portraits on the table. And they were professional portraits taken of Tim and the defendant and Jordan. And he was going to throw all of those away. And he told Candace, I can finally have the house the way I want it. So even though they were getting all of these tips and things, statements from people that knew them, Detective Pinder still made sure he pursued any other potential suspects. If somebody called in a tip and said, hey, you need to check this person out, Detective Pinder did it. The forensic crime scene processing turned up 2 other men's DNA and fingerprints on some lubrication bottles that were in that apartment. Detective Pinder located them and were able to rule them out as suspects. So he was running down every lead he possibly could. As he's doing this, more and more information is coming in. He learns about the insurance policy and the retirement fund. And he gets all that paperwork. And he learns from the insurance company that the defendant is calling all the time trying to get that money. And then he talks to more friends who say, yeah, we've been talking to the defendant, and he keeps telling us how he can't live without that insurance money. And he really needs that insurance money. And he also told one of their friends, hey, I'm planning a big trip at the end of the year once I get that insurance money. You want to come with me on this big trip? Detective Pinder is obviously concerned about this. And then Detective Pinder gets the toxicology results back, because they take a while to get that with Tim's blood. And he finds out about the extraordinarily high level of diphenhydramine in Tim's blood. As he's getting all of this information in and all this evidence, it's all pointing to one person as the murderer of Tim, and that's the defendant. So for the next 6 or 7 months, Detective Pinder spends countless hours going over all of the video that was received from those businesses that were on the roof between the apartment and the residence, and the videos from the neighbors. Because there's a lot of it, and it takes a long time to go through it all. He goes through all of that. He also painstakingly goes through the defendant's cell phone and Tim's cell phone, which will have geolocation information to tell you where did that phone go. And also tell you, was somebody on that phone actively using it or were they not? So after Detective Pinder goes through all of those cell phone records and reports and all of the videos from the businesses and the neighborhood surveillance, he is able to prove what the defendant did that night of the 23rd into the 24th and where he went based on those records and those videos. And what can be proven from those records and the videos that you will see is that in the evening of Thursday the 23rd, nobody left the house. The white truck of the defendant's was there. Tim's Jeep was there. Both the defendant's phone and the victim's phone were both there on the 23rd. But in the early morning hours of the 24th, Tim's phone travels from the residence to the apartment and is at the apartment at 2:12 in the morning on Friday. Coincidentally, what else travels from the residence to the apartment at that exact same time? The defendant's white pickup truck. You'll see a video of that. The truck is there for about 20 minutes. Then the truck travels back to the residence. Then Tim's white Jeep, leaves the residence at 2:40 and arrives at the apartment at 2:45. And we know that, and you'll see a video of that also. And we know then, after he drops the Jeep off at 2:45, he's going to walk back. And you'll see a video from the Marathon gas station that's right on that road between the two that shows somebody walking right towards the direction of the defendant's house. And Google Map puts the time it would take the defendant to walk from that video to his residence, having him arrive at the residence at 3:26 a.m. What else do we know happened at 3:26 a.m.? You will see the cell phone reports that show the defendant was accessing the Ring doorbell camera at 3:26 a.m., right when Google Maps puts him arriving at the house. After he accesses the Ring doorbell camera and deletes all the video footage, he goes on Facebook, and then he goes on Grindr. And he's on there until he leaves to go to the gym that morning at 4:40. And remember that every detective that talked to the defendant, he told every one of them, I never left the house. I was asleep the whole night until I woke up to go to the gym. The evidence and the videos will show that that is not true. And when you hear from all the witnesses in this case, that will tell you the things the defendant said about Tim, how he felt about Tim, how he wasn't going to let Tim leave him. And you see all the videos from the businesses and the neighbors. And you see the cell phone reports of what the defendant was doing on his phone. We will prove to beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant wanted Tim dead. He carefully planned out his murder, and he executed that plan with deadly precision. And the defendant is guilty of first-degree murder.
Thank you very much, ma'am.